The Last of Us. My claim: how does The Last of Us portray trauma in PTSD and how this representation influences players' understanding of trauma? My digital artifact is on your personal favorite, The Last of Us, investigating how it represents trauma in PTSD, whether experiencing these themes interactively, and how can it influence the player's empathy and understanding. Predominantly examining how trauma is communicated through its narrative, gameplay, character perspective, sound, and visual storytelling. Further demonstrating how video games can move beyond entertainment and become a medium for exploring complex human experiences. Inside the Halloween success, The Last of Us is a post-apocalyptic action-adventure series developed by Naughty Dog. First released in 2013, the narrative follows Joel, a survivor living in a post-apocalyptic America, who is tasked with transporting Ellie, a teenage girl who might be important to humanity's survival. While it contains survival, horror, and violence, its popularity comes largely from its character-driven storytelling and emotional complexity. The series has developed a huge global audience and has become recognized as more than just an action game. This makes it a very interesting case study to examine how games can communicate complex psychological experiences. Trauma in PTSD is a central theme. Trauma isn't simply part of the plot, it influences how characters behave, make decisions, and interact with one another. The Last of Us is an unrelenting examination of the effects of trauma and violent cycles of revenge. The game's complex narrative structure and its use of the player-character relationship and the player-character switch at the game's midpoint has prompted strong reactions, both negative and positive, from players. These elements come together to confront players with their own understanding of trauma, revenge, empathy, and acceptance in powerful and effective ways. Importantly, there is already academic research specifically examining PTSD and the player-character relationship in The Last of Us. Stevens Michael Johnson argues that the game examines trauma, revenge, empathy, and acceptance through this player-character relationship and its switch between Ellie and Abby. Deep into the Abyss, the analytic framework. This analytic framework and this DA will be utilized to investigate how the representation of trauma in The Last of Us moves from narrative and gameplay techniques to player immersion and character identification, and whether these experiences can contribute to greater empathy and understanding of psychological trauma. This framework is supported by research into narrative transportation. A 2020 study by Walkington, Ash Wigman, and Bowles found that narrative transportation can facilitate empathetic responding, suggesting that becoming immersed in a narrative can influence how audiences respond to others. While researching for my DA idea, I found significant research specifically examining The Last of Us Part 2. A study interviewing 12 players revealed that the player-character relationships and attachment affected how players experience the game. This research will align with the format of how I intend to do my primary research. Now moving on to playing with the dead. Well, not actually, just wordplay. In other words, this is my project plan. My primary data will be collected through online surveys, questionnaires, and also conducting interviews with the players. My secondary data will be collected through existing research and studies, media forum and discussions like Reddit, Twitter, and all of those websites. And my format will be done through a YouTube video essay. Now, the last of it. In other words, my conclusion. Summarizing everything that I touched upon on this presentation, The Last of Us uses storytelling, gameplay, character perspective, and visual design to represent trauma and PTSD. By allowing players to experience events through the characters, the game may encourage identification and empathy. However, players' responses can differ. Not everybody will interpret or empathize with trauma in the same way. My research will investigate whether interactive experiences can deepen players' understanding of psychological trauma or not.